unmute myself. That's good. Hi, Gary. Good afternoon. Oh, I can't hear you, Gary. Sorry.
There we go.
There we go. Oh, you're looking obviously
some chocolate.
Yeah, because you lost so much weight that we have to reshoot the video.
Yeah. No, I have. I've lost 1.5 stone, but then you sent me some chocolate.
So should we send you bananas and oranges next? Do you think that would that?
Yeah. Thank you. But are you okay?
Yeah, all good. Yeah, so it's all kicked off again today. It's like the good old days, doing Zoom calls and the government changing things 10 minutes before I go on the Zoom call. It's amazing. So,
Caroline, just so you know, in case the other guys see it, I got the wrong box of chocolate, so I got the wrong message. It was supposed to be sent to, but I got Tony Brown's message. Is it Tony?
Tony Brown.
Tony Brownwell's message, yeah.
Oh, okay. I will go and see how we managed to do that. You've got obviously the nicer chocolates, obviously, because he sent Tony nicer chocolates than he got on your behalf, obviously.
Well,
so
chocolate. I haven't got chocolates.
Listen. I'm eating them anyway.
That's good. Excellent. No, that's really good. Okay, I was going to give it a couple of minutes, but obviously everybody who needs to be on here is on here. Hi, Robert. Hi, James. Hi, Brad. Nice to see you.
Morning, Caroline. While you're talking about chocolates, my wife found them very tasty as well. Thank you very much.
Oh, good. Brilliant. Good. So what I'll start with is the breaking news, because HR lives on the edge now, of the new job support scheme, because they've come up with a new name for it. But furlough is definitely ending at the end of October. I was going to say November. From the beginning of November, there's a new scheme in place, just been announced. So therefore, there are very few details on that now. That as long as the employer pays 1/3 of somebody's salary, the government will pay the other 2/3. So effectively, it's 100%. They will be paid 100% of their salary. You will pay 1/3. The government will pay 2/3. Okay.
Wow.
So
is it not up to 77%? Was something I just saw on BBC News.
Nadia?
It's coming out as we sit here, basically.
Something about like we would pay.
We're
20, we pay 22, they pay 55, and it equals 77% of their wages or something. So it's a bit like the 80%.
So there has now been an update sent out by the Treasury. So while you guys talk, I'm going to take a minute and read.
Okay.
Like I said, we're living on the edge here, so that's good. So we'll do that. So there is going to be something. So if you were wondering whether to do redundancy, you possibly don't need to do redundancy, but the point being that the government is only going to pay for part of the salary. If you can't afford to pay for the other part of the salary, then we do need to be talking about redundancies. We don't know whether the job scheme, because it literally is since 12 o'clock they've mentioned that, so we really are scrabbling to get any details, and they were never very good at giving out details anyway. If you remember the furlough scheme, they told us beginning of July, oh, there'll be details at the end of July, by which time we'd all figured it out anyway. Whether you would be able to use that payment, that job support, while people are on their notice, if they're on gardening leave. So we have been using the furlough payments while people are on gardening leave as part of their notice period. The question would be whether you would be able to do that if you did a redundancy process after the 1st of November. So all of these questions we will be asking. We're again suitably impressed by our QC, Daniel Barnett, who has come back with what 2-3 updates so far since 12 o'clock. So he's obviously on top of it and yelling at the Treasury as well to say, guys, you can't just announce that and then go, oh yeah, we'll give you some details next week, because everybody will want to know to plan. But so there will be stuff coming in.
Okay.
Okay.
I can tell you what I can see, which is so the post from the Treasury was a tweet. Professional, right? And it says it's a 6-month scheme starting 1st of November. to be eligible, employees work a minimum of 33% of their hours. For the remaining hours not worked, the government and the employer will pay 1/3 of the wages each. So employees who work 33% of their hours will receive 77% of their pay. So you pay them as normal if they work at least 33% of their hours. Then the remaining hours that they're not working, you will pay 33% of those hours, and the government will pay 33%, and the employee will not get paid for 33%. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. So that's a bit of a maths that we need with our stiff drink.
Or the employee won't get paid for 22%. Sorry. That's what their graph says, which I'm not sure makes sense.
Yeah, so it's not, yeah, you're like you said, James, it's not 2/3 or 100%, it's like 77%, isn't it? But the onus is still very much on the employer to be paying the majority. There's only a top up. So it's only going to work if you were intending to keep people on anyway. If you were thinking that you probably don't need them, or there's not going to be enough business coming in, so F&B, you're hoping that it's going to be better, but with the current curfew, well, I'm not sure the curfew is particularly a problem for the clubhouse, but if there are more restrictions that actually F&B isn't going to be viable anymore, this is not going to stop it, but it's just if there are other people that you need to be doing it with. So we'll keep an eye on that, and I'll be sending out updates via the emails as well, and obviously we'll talk about it in these Zoom calls. As I said, we'll keep doing these weekly Zoom calls until there's nothing less to discuss. And guess what? There's always something new to discuss. It's great. It's fantastic. Who thought that HR would be living on the edge? It's great. Sorry, I do mean that. I know it's being sarcastic. It's like, oh, so exciting, in a bad way, obviously. Right. So let's just, before I go into the long-term sickness absence, Jeff had a question, odd question, possibly, but is a see-through visor that covers the whole face classed as a face covering? I don't know. The thing being, in as much as if it's open at the sides and the bottom, which is what the ones I've seen, Jeff, then it is a face covering, but it's not a face mask, and it's not stopping any droplets from going out. So they are pretty, but they're not particularly effective compared to the face masks. So
I'm not really, I know this is going to sound quite flippant, I'm not really worried how effective they are, it's just whether they're legally compliant. And if the bar and catering staff much prefer the idea of these visors, I've also got fabric face masks that they can use. But I just sort of took the view, well, it's a face covering and therefore it covers the nose, it covers the mouth, and therefore it's probably compliant. But I've heard a few conflicting views to that, which is disappointing.
Yes. I think it's only going to be a problem if somebody reports it, in as much as somebody sneezes and guess what, everything goes out and they go, wait a minute, that's not protecting us. So I think if they're out, having that visor with a simple face mask would work quite happily. They don't need to have the industrial level ones. What's it, the N95 or whatever it is from 3M. But I agree, it looks more reassuring, but I also know it doesn't reassure me because I know all of the bits come out the bottom. So it's like, actually, does that make any difference? So. And
if someone refuses to wear one?
Okay, so they would need, so you can refuse to wear a face mask if you have a condition. They will need to go somehow, I don't know what, Nadia, you're feeling on this. I do know I read it, there's a sunflower lanyard, I think it's a sunflower lanyard you're supposed to wear to show that you can't wear a face mask. But I don't know whether you can just buy a sunflower lanyard or whether you're supposed to get it from the NHS or what, in which case we should all go and get a sunflower lanyard. I don't know. Nadia,
I am unfortunately not sure. I have also heard that you need to wear a lanyard. I didn't realize it was the sunflower one. And I have seen people wear ones that says, it has a little tag on that says, I can't wear a face mask. But to be honest, I can't wear a face mask and I go everywhere without one and no one ever challenges me because I assume they realize I can't wear one. So, but in the workplace, I think you might find that a little bit more challenging. Your clients might challenge it. Unfortunately, we can try and find out how what sort of lanyard you need to give your employees. We'll find that out for you.
Yeah, fine. Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think if they can come up with, well, I get anxious or something like that, and you would need to have that conversation with them on a one-to-one basis, not in front of everybody, so people don't get ideas. If they just say, well, I don't believe in it, sorry, that's not adequate reason. You do need to wear it. Well, I'm not going to. Okay, well, now you're refusing a reasonable management instruction, and it's under the health and safety guidelines that we're required to follow. Otherwise, we will get shut down. You need to wear this. So. Okay. Robert, return to work question. Employee doesn't want to be flexible in regard to shifts. Employed for 15 years. States need to be home to cook dinner for 14-year-old son. Has she ever needed to cook dinner for a 14-year-old son before?
Well, in the past, her shifts have generally been from about 8 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning through to 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And there's never ever been an issue. But now she's saying, I need to be back home. We've asked everybody else, because we're not opening catering until 11 o'clock, Bar and catering until 11 o'clock now. It's very different how we're operating. Everybody else, same contract, 40 hours a week on a rota basis. It doesn't stipulate times. If she's saying she can't do that and doesn't want to, she's now actually, by a separate text to the catering manager, said, I will take 2 hours a day of my holiday to fit in, but I want to check, is that something that we could possibly do, or actually just make this person say that this is job change, this is what you have to do. If you're not willing to do it, then let's come to agreement.
Okay. So what I would be saying is that if she's been doing those hours, it's custom and practice for those hours. You haven't been changing them around. So she has kind of got those hours now. I do appreciate it's changing. You're only opening at 11. What you could suggest, one, you could say that she takes the holiday hours, so she gets a full pay, or you say, look, we can accommodate you, but only to the point that we will give you hours 11 till 3, or I don't know what, I mean, 14-year-old son. I mean, honestly, my children could cook by that stage.
I mean, I can't prove this, but I know from other employees saying she's quite happy to leave her son unattended to go out socialising as a single mother, but she absolutely needs to be there to cook his dinner, which is just a little.
And there are so many value judgments in that sentence.
Well, look, I'm a middle-aged man. I am bound to be judgmental.
I'm just saying, I'm a single mother with a 16-year-old son. Anyway, it's not your. That's interesting. What I'm thinking is that if you say to her, look, we can accommodate that. I don't know what time she actually does say she needs to leave. We can give you reduced hours, 11 till 4. I can't imagine she needs to be home before 4 because secondary school. And you will just be paid for those hours. And that's it, because it's a flexible working request. You're changing your hours.
So I could write a letter to her and say you need to request flexible working or flexible hours, which will mean a reduction in your total hours that you work in a week. But she needs to request that. Or I could accommodate the holiday request of using 2 hours up every day to accommodate that. Okay. Yeah,
no, absolutely. So the thing you just do need to be a little bit careful of, because she's possibly the type that would do that, is a claim for indirect sex discrimination.
Well, she will, whatever we send to her, and I will need you to approve the letter, it will go to Citizens Advice, because we've had so many problems with this employee over the years for every reason going. So.
Then I absolutely would not advise a long-term arrangement of her taking 2 hours of holiday a day, because that one will come back to bite you. If it's a short-term arrangement,
that's what she has said in a text to the catering manager, and that's why I didn't want to agree to anything until I'd spoken to you guys. So, so if you say no, that can't be done, but what you can do is request flexible working, which will result in a shortening of the hours you work per week. That I'm happy to go along with that.
I would advise that you possibly go back to her and say, on a temporary basis, we are willing to let you use 2 hours of your holiday at the end of the day. However, if you need this arrangement to change long term, could I request that you put in a formal flexible working request, and we will process that through the normal channels.
Yeah, and
Something along those lines.
you have a sheet that outlines what flexible working is.
Sorry?
You have a sheet, like a fact sheet as to what flexible working is.
No, because it's different for every single person. That's the point. Flexible working is a very tailored and unique to each individual's request.
Okay.
But I can help you put all that together, get it out to her, and then help you process it as it comes in.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So I have an update from my health and safety guru, Jean, which is very lovely. So the face shield thing, it's not mentioned specifically in the government guidance. The guidance just says it should cover mouth and nose, but the Scottish government, and we know how specific they can be, says that the face shield does count as a face covering if it covers mouth and nose. So if the Scottish government says that, and they seem to be a little bit more adamant about things than our government, obviously, then we'll go with that. So you'll be fine with that. Okay. Right. What
I also have I have found the lanyard. You can buy, it's a blue lanyard, and it has a badge on it that says I'm exempt from wearing a face mask, and then it's got a face mask and a picture through like a.
And how much does it cost, Nadia? How much does it cost?
They are anything from $1.99 to $4.99 each.
We could buy a bulk and send them round to all of you, and then you could all wear one all the time. Excellent. It seems a very low barrier to get out of wearing a face mask, doesn't it? What happens when we all wear these lanyards that cost $1.99 and the government goes, well, you're not allowed to do that anymore. Okay, but how are you going to stop us?
Have to ask for evidence then if somebody says I'm exempt from wearing a face mask.
I don't think you want to go down that route, to be honest, because then you've got a disability. Potentially, if it's anxiety, long term they've gone medication, then you just accept it at the moment, and we then have to maybe say, well, if you can't wear a face mask and you need to be out front, and it's a problem with the people you're serving, you're going to have to do behind the scenes just with staff, and that might change their hours. It might mean they're more on furlough. It might mean they're doing the new job scheme. Because, or that, when it comes to redundancy situation, we need to, and this is where it's going to be tricky. If we do have more people refusing to do it, and they've got the lanyard, the official lanyard, then it's going to be a problem, because you can't dismiss somebody for saying they can't wear a face mask. That's going to be an indirect disability claim. And I'm sure the ambulance chasers will be gearing up to get those ones, because there wasn't very much from the coronavirus personal injury claims. We haven't seen much on that. But if people start refusing to wear face masks and get, because of anxiety, they say it's anxiety, then there might be issues there. I'm not sure that it's going to be incredibly expensive, but it's going to be a faff. And then it's like, okay, let's try and avoid faff.
If an employee or a member has this lanyard and says they can't wear a face mask, then we just need to record that person has told us they can't wear a face mask, and we have done our due diligence to make sure that people are wearing face masks in the building, and those people are exempt.
Yeah, and I would say if they are going to say they can't wear, then it's like, ask them that they need to therefore get a lanyard that states that. I don't know that it's your responsibility, but they need to have that responsibility to do it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So let's do share screen. We're doing long-term sickness. Long-term sickness absence share. Okay. So, oh gosh, come on. Right. Okay. So we're starting with this picture of the industrial north, which is Bradford. Okay. We've got a picture of Bradford because the only some I can't even think what it's called, formula that you can use when you're dealing with sickness absence, if you are going to use a formula. And our recommendation is not that you do that particularly, but it is something that does get mentioned, particularly if people have been in corporate life, is the Bradford factor. Okay, I don't know why it's called Bradford. It's probably about a person rather than town, let's be honest, but you know, I just like the picture of Bradford. And the Bradford factor is the number S squared is the total number of times an individual is absent over a set period, which is usually, you know, 52 weeks. And D is the total of number of days of absence of that person. Okay, and that gives you a Bradford factor score. There is a website there, the bradfordfactorcalculator.com. So if you just Google Bradford, sorry, I need to stop saying that. There are other search engines available. If you just search for Bradford factor, the Bradford factor calculator will come up. It's not a difficult calculation, to be honest. So you don't really need a calculator, I suppose, for redundancy, but there is a website for that. But what I thought I would do is go through with you now 2 worked examples to show you the difference based on the Bradford factor. So if somebody has a broken leg, they're off for 6 weeks, which is 30 working days, so they're working 5 days a week. Okay, they're off for 1 instance of 6 weeks. Okay, 1 squared is 1 times 30 days off. Their Bradford factor score is 30. Okay, 1 Monday off a month over a year is 12 days off a year. 12 squared is 144 times 12 times. So 12 times off times the number of days is 12 times 12, well, 144 times 12 is 1,728. I went through this several times with my colleagues. So I'm like, wow, that is just so far apart from 30 to 1,728. So different. It's not just double it or anything. This is why frequent short-term absence is often far more detrimental to a business than a one-off absence of a broken leg. Because if you know somebody's going to be off for 6 weeks, you can get somebody else in as a temp, you can share all the tasks around. Whereas if there's somebody who's going to be off on a Monday in the month, but you don't know which Monday, you don't know what they're going to be responsible for on that day, and that is far more disruptive. Okay, now we've got 2 figures here, 30 and 1,728. At what point should flags go up? Now, this is very organizational specific, so you have to work out in your organization what it is. We are not recommending that you use this as the system for actually doing disciplinaries. Okay, what we're saying is if you think somebody in your team, and I'm going to say it's a greenkeeping team, has unnecessary absence, if you use this factor to analyze all the sickness absence for that last 12 months in that team, you will then find out actually who is at risk and who isn't. We had a situation, one of our clubs, that they were complaining about a greenkeeper who nobody liked, what a surprise, but he'd been there over 3 years, and they said he's had a lot of absence. I'm like, well, how much absence has he had? It turns out he's had 3 days absence in 6 months. That's not a lot of absence. But we said, okay, we need to compare that to what the standard is in that team. Give us the data for all of their sickness for the last 3 years, which is when we discovered they actually had a different problem. Every June for 3 years, the head greenkeeper took the first week in June off with flu. The deputy took the next week off in June with flu. The first greenkeeper took the next week off in June with flu. And then the fourth one was the other one, but the one they didn't like wasn't involved in the flu. He managed to avoid being infected by the flu epidemic in June. They'd done that in that order for the last 3 years. And we only had the last 3 years because they couldn't find the records from previously. So they've probably been doing it as long as they can because there was self-certification for the first 7 days. So they actually had the problem that people were deliberately defrauding the club of money, as opposed to this other guy who seemed to be genuinely ill, just occasionally ill, you see. So you need to make sure that your head greenkeeper is the head greenkeeper and not a glorified team leader who sees himself as one of the team. And what we then did was change the reporting procedure for sickness absence in the greens team, which you can do. You can change a sickness absence procedure at a moment's notice, so that in the greens team, every absence from day one had to be documented by a doctor's note. There was no self-certification anymore. We would pay for the doctor's note, no problem at all, but you had to get a doctor's note. And we did that, what that would have been now 18 months ago, beginning of 2019, we changed that. Guess what? In June last year, there was no flu in the Greens team. So I'm just saying you need to be aware of what the reality is and not whether, and obviously the greenkeeper who they rang us about ended up with no problems at all because he wasn't actually a problem, they just didn't like him. We had to part company a different way, but it wasn't because of sickness. So just use the Bradford factor to see who is actually a problem in the team. It's not a default for getting rid of people, okay? If the Bradford factor score is under 45, you shouldn't be concerned about it. These are just ballpark figures. Like I said, you do need to adjust them for your organization based on what your normal level of sickness is, okay? If it's between 45 and 100, you should be monitoring it, making sure you have your return to work conversations after every absence, monitoring why they're off, making sure you're getting all the certification, self-certification or doctor's notes. 100 to 900, you might want to start having formal meetings and asking for GP's notes, okay, to say how can we help them manage this absence. And it's over 900 on the web, it says, oh yes, you should be thinking about dismissing people. Well, yes, to a point, but we need to go through a whole disciplinary thing. That's technical words, obviously. Disciplinary process for that, and getting GP's reports, occupational health reports. Under 2 years for everything like that, you could probably just part company. We wouldn't usually say it was because of sickness. We would do it maybe because they hadn't followed the sickness absence reporting procedure, because usually they don't, to be honest. But it's, if you are getting numbers over 900, absolutely call us straight away, so that we can actually go, okay, what is the problem? How does it compare to everybody else? What do we need to put in place? What's being said on the sick notes? One company called me in, a private sector one, and said, right, we've got a problem with this employee. She's had 16 days off in the last 6 months. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's quite a lot. What she had? Oh, well, she always writes down women's problems. I'm like, okay, and what are those women's problems? Oh, we couldn't ask. No, we couldn't possibly ask what women's problems. Okay, I will come in and talk to her as a woman to find out what those women's problems were. And she had put them down because she didn't want to tell them about it, but she, as soon as I said, okay, you're going to have to give me a bit more detail, turns out she did have a serious problem, which she had not spoken to the GP about, so she was just trying to deal with it herself, which was actually not dealing with it at all. She was just off quite regularly. So after we had the discussion, she went to the GP, she got some medication, she got some treatment, the sickness went down. But because the company wasn't willing to ask, okay, women's problems, can you give me a bit more detail on that? Because they were scared, because, you know, I don't know why. If a man said to me, oh, it's man's problems, I'd be going, okay, I think you're going to have to give it more. I wouldn't be shy about that, but maybe I'm just not shy. I don't know. Right, so done that. Okay, so this one is supposed to, this picture is supposed to denote that once you've got a sick note from the GP, the sick note that the GP writes for any period of absence is the period that it should take for the person to be healthy again. Okay, so it's almost unheard of, and at the moment it will be unheard of, to get a note from the GP saying they are fit to return to work. If they are not fit, they will go back to the GP and get another fit note. If it expires, they are supposed to be back at work. There are a couple of exceptions. So if it is something contagious and they work in the food area, I don't know, hepatitis, I think, I can't think what other things, but something contagious like that, they should have been written off for the length of time that it would normally take for that to pass through their system, and they would be fine again. You can, in those cases, possibly justify asking for confirmation that they are no longer infectious. But again, it will usually be that they're off for 2-3 weeks, whatever the standard period is for that time. The other thing is that although they have been written off sick, you don't have to, the people themselves do not have to not come into work, okay? You do have a duty of care to make sure that the work environment is safe, that they are safe, that their colleagues are safe. So if they come in and they are infectious, you can send them home. But if they are just, oh, I've got a bad back, but I can't afford to be off because I only get SSP, so I'm going to be in at work, and they are in at work and they're doing their job, then that's fine. Okay, so that's that one. Do a fit note. All right, sick pay. What do you have today? Sick pay, we should have all had this conversation anyway. It's more for non-clients really, but you don't have to pay anything other than SSP, unless of course you've got it in your contract. Most of you have got enhanced sick pay in there. There are conditions for them to meet it, i.e. that they've followed the reporting procedure, they've given you the sick notes, etc. You do have to pay SSP if they qualify for that, okay? But it's, and it is what's in the contract, and you cannot discriminate between full-time people and part-time people / 0 hours people. We often see this when people start working with us, that they have the greenkeepers and the office staff on, 15 days full pay a year, and the 0 hours on nothing, just SSP. You can't do that. You can absolutely have it that it's a pro rata entitlement for the 0 hours people, but you cannot have that they don't have any sick pay, because that is discriminating against part-time workers, and that's illegal. Okay, so that's fine. Holiday, which we might ever be able to have again, maybe outside this country, is that anybody who's on long-term sick or anybody who's on any sickness continues to accrue their holiday entitlement. Okay, so this is one of the downsides of long-term sickness. Even if you're not paying them anything more because they've exhausted club pay and they've exhausted SSP, they're still on your books. And we do have a client who's in that situation. The person who's off sick is still accruing holiday pay and has a right to it to be paid out at their full rate. Okay, but they do keep accruing holiday pay, and the number of times it is slightly one of these ones that you do need to have, a bottle of red wine to accept, and it's obviously politically correct madness, but that's what it is. The committees might say, well, they're not doing anything, therefore they don't need holiday. That's just maybe, but that is what the law is saying. It has gone up to the case law, the top employee, the appeals tribunals. It is something you have to do. It's not, well, that doesn't make any sense. So many things don't make sense. Don't even get me started on coronavirus. So it's just making sure you know that. Now, employee sickness, okay, so any sickness, you need to get fit notes. One club that was not my client, because they said I was too expensive, I can't think why they would say that, I'm excellent value for money, said that they had a guy and he'd been paid his full sick pay and he'd been paid SSP, and that had run out now, and could they just give him his P45? And I'm like, well, how long has he been with you? 10 years, okay. And what's he sick with? Well, we don't really know. Okay, but he's been off sick for a year. Yes, they'd only had one sick note for the first month. They paid him 6 months full pay on one sick note that only covered the first month. They hadn't chased for any sick notes. He'd not given them any more sick notes. They then paid him SSP for another 6 months, and that had run out now, and they didn't even know whether he was still alive. They had no idea. They'd had no contact with him whatsoever. And I said, actually, just issue the P45. If he comes back and says you can't do that, we will then say, oh, absolutely, our mistake, sorry about that, payroll got it wrong, and deal with it. He didn't come back. He may well have been dead. We have no idea what it was. But the point is, the club paid 11 months of money out to him that they did not need to do so. And this was a club that obviously said, we have no money for anything, we can't possibly pay for anything, and they had thrown away 11 months of money that they didn't need to. So everybody who has an absence is either self-certification, you make sure you get those forms, or it's on a fit note from the GP, okay? And just to clarify as well, if they think they're being clever by writing down stress at work, that is not considered a disability under employment law, okay? It's the equivalent of flu, okay? It is not the same as stress, it's not the same as anxiety, it's not the same as depression. It's just very situation specific, therefore it's not a disability. And again, that has been decided at the appeal level, appeal tribunal level. So that is not a personal thing, that is absolutely set in law. So employers saying, oh, I've got stress at work, okay, that's all very good, but we don't need to worry about it particularly, but let's see what's been going on. You do have a duty of care to all your staff to make sure it's a safe working environment. So if somebody does come in, even before coronavirus, with a stinking cold and is coughing and spluttering everywhere, you need to send them home, because you cannot afford to have the rest of your workplace infected. Okay. So that is the duty of care. That is sometimes a bit of a hard one if they don't have full sick pay. If they've only got SSP, that does feel a bit hard, but actually you can make a decision as to whether you want to say, oh, we'll pay a couple of days as an exception to you. But you do have the duty of care and the right to send them home. Long-term sickness is any sickness that is continuous for 4 weeks or more. Okay, so when you have somebody signed off for 4 weeks, some of them do, some of them are 2 weeks and then 2 weeks, that's when you need to get in touch with us and say, right, this person is signed off, what can we do? Because we need to do a GP's, well, there you go, a GP's report. Now, we've got to get the consent, written consent, and there's a proper form. This is not an email, can we talk to your GP? It's a proper form advising them of their rights to go to them, say, can we talk to your GP about your sickness absence? They send yes or no. Most of the time they say yes. I mean, certainly over 80% of the time they say yes, so it's not a big thing. And then we have to go with a separate letter to the GP saying, this is what the person has said they're off with. Can you give us any advice on what we're doing? But it obviously is, you know, 3 pages of writing for them. You'll have to pay for that. I can't remember what it is. The BMA has defined how much it is. I think it's about £90 plus VAT for a report, and it can take up to 6 weeks, which is why we start it at the 4-week stage. Okay, now it depends a little bit what the person is off with. It also depends as to how much sick pay you have in your contracts as to how urgent this is. So if you have 3 months full pay and then 3 months half pay, we're going to need to jump on that sooner than if you just pay SSP, because of the financial implications of it. Okay, and if you have got people who have exhausted SSP and on nothing at all, then we will absolutely deal with it. But again, it's not quite the same urgency, because it's not actually costing the club much apart from that holiday pay. Okay, but the GP's report we need 6 weeks usually for, and they may come back and be helpful. Some of them are, most of them are not, but it's a stage we have to do. Some of them have come back and said, yes, I don't know, you probably need to speak to a psychiatrist about his mental state. Okay, you're his doctor. Have you referred him to a psychiatrist? No, then how's he supposed to get, honestly, sometimes you do wonder what planet they're on, these GPs. So anyway, sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not. What we're looking for is really, are they coming back to work anytime soon? And do you think what they've got is a disability? And they will sometimes give us that information, sometimes not. If they don't, then the next level is for us to do an occupational health report. So we have a private company with medical people, obviously, who are doing this on as an extra job probably, and they can either do a telephone call or a face-to-face visit. If it's at the club, that is easy to arrange. It is obviously expensive. It's about £400 odd, but it is possible to do it. They do not like home visits. They didn't like home visits before coronavirus. I don't think they're going to do home visits now. So it would need to be at a neutral site, so that preferably outside, so that people don't get infected with stuff. But we can brief them about the situation and what we're looking for. Not that they make up the answer, but that they are aiming to gather data on, are they coming back, or whether there's any chance really of doing a settlement agreement if we want to part company. But that is an extra build-up. After getting the GP's report, and we would have a meeting with the person in question and discuss the report and about them coming back and see whether they would like to have a phased return, which is, I think, no, I haven't got that one yet. But also, it's just to get an indication, because we're not close to dismissing them yet. If they've been off for 4 weeks or 2 months, it's unlikely, unless the GP has come back and said categorically there is no way they are ever coming back to work. If they say that, then we could move for a dismissal. Okay, and we'll go through that in a minute. If they don't say anything like that, and they very rarely say anything like that, then we're going to have to go through a few more hoops before we can go for a dismissal. So you've got the GP's report, you've got the occupational health report, the case law on the disability it is governed by the disability cases that go through as to what is reasonable and what isn't for reasonable adjustments. This is why we're looking at the tribunal cases for that. The Equality Act 2010 says what a disability is defined as, which is a long-term condition that affects your day-to-day life. So long-term being more than 12 months, okay? So they might say they've got depression, but that's it. They might only have just got depression. So that wouldn't quite count yet. But again, we're making sure we get all the information before we part company. And then again, the case law says, what is a disability? Stress at work is not a disability. What is a disability? Oops, sorry. Do that. Phased return is a good way to do things as well, because if there's people saying, oh, I really want to come back, and I'm going to be honest with you, quite a lot of people say we don't want them back. Okay, but we don't have enough evidence to dismiss them yet. So what we usually agree is a phased return, and as part of that phased return, which is a reasonable adjustment, the employee in question will come to us and say, actually, is there a way we can come to an agreement so I don't have to come back to work? So the phased return would usually be couple of hours a day for the first week, then 3 hours a day for the next week, 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day. You don't have to pay them their full pay for that. You can legally just pay them the hours they work for. Other people say, well, you could do 2 days full, but 2 days full, if you're doing a phased return, is a long day as opposed to a few hours a day. So we would usually recommend that you do a few hours a day building up. You set in stone that you're going to review it at the end of each week, not if we need to, we'll talk about it. No, you absolutely, Friday afternoon before they go home, okay, how was this week? What do we need to do? Are you happy to go up to 3 hours today? So you're doing the caring, reasonable employer. And what we found is that after a maximum of 3 weeks, they come back to us. And again, there's either it's going to work, that's great, or they come back to us and say, actually, I don't want to do this anymore. Can we come to an arrangement? I know I said I didn't want to, but actually I do want to. I don't want to come and do this work anymore. Thank you very much. And then we have a settlement agreement for that. Discrimination, disability. This is why we jump through these hoops, is so because any discrimination claim is unlimited award potentially, and you have to prove that it was not on the basis of that disability that you did whatever you did. Okay, so you have to prove a negative, which is very difficult. They do not have to prove you did it, you have to prove you didn't do it, which is why we don't ask for medical questionnaires when you hire people anymore, because if you find out something then, and the worst case, you withdraw your offer and say, oh, actually, no, we don't want you anymore, that is automatic disability discrimination. Okay, so that's a blank check. And then once you know about something, you always have to make those reasonable adjustments. So it's usually better not to know and to evaluate them on the basis of performance. If their performance is rubbish and you do a termination on that basis and they say, oh, it's because I had depression, you didn't tell us you had depression, therefore our decision is solid, it's fine. Okay, so parting company from somebody who has sickness. So I had a question from one of the other clients. A Green staff member has been off work since 2019. He's got an arthritic knee and he had full sick pay for 6 months and SSP until March. Okay, I'm not sure how that works, but okay. And they got the sick notes, that's fine. And he actually said initially that he's never going to be fit enough to come back to work. He's now trying to get more money out of the club. He's been there 22 years and he would like either redundancy money or a settlement agreement. Now, if it's a sickness absence and somebody can't do the work, it's called SOSR, which stands for some other substantial reason. Okay, so what we're doing is if they can't do the job because they can't physically do the job, is we are getting all the medical information, we're giving them the chance to talk about phased return, reasonable adjustments, all of those things. But if there is no way that we can get them to come back, and it's not, oh, at some point I might come back, that doesn't count as coming back. If the doctor says, yes, I'll be back next Monday at 9 o'clock, that's fine, we'll go to that. But, oh, they'll be back maybe next year sometime, that you're not expected as a small business or any business to wait that long. And we will be then having a dismissal meeting with them after we've done the medical jumping through hoops to sit down and go, look, we've done everything we can. We can't give you this, keep this job role open. Therefore, we are going to dismiss you for some other substantial reason, which means you only have to pay them their notice period. There is no redundancy pay, there's no settlement agreement. It is just the notice period. And if you, I would say though that if you're paying them a notice period and it's a statutory notice period because they've been there for so long, then you have to pay that notice period at full pay. Okay, you don't pay it at sick pay amounts, you pay it at full pay amounts. If you're paying the notice period is longer than the statutory notice period, you do not have to pay anything more than sick pay. Okay, now I'm not expecting you to remember all this. What I'm expecting you to remember is that if you have somebody who's off long-term sick, i.e. more than 4 weeks, there are ways to part company. We do have to jump through hoops, but you won't have to necessarily do a settlement with them. We can just do it on notice period if we've got all the medical information that is suitably vague to say, yeah, they might come back at some point someday. We don't have to wait for that. Okay, good. So that was that. Are there any questions? It's a lot to absorb, more than usual in my calls. Have a think about it. What I will do, I'm just thinking, I'll send you through the link again to the Dropbox folder, and I'll put the presentation in the Dropbox folder, and I will put this on my YouTube channel. This video on the YouTube channel, so you can look at it, and you can also absolutely get any of the committee say, oh, well, I think we should just do da-da-da. Okay, well, go start watching from 15 minutes in. That's all about how to deal with sickness absence. That's what we need to be doing, and then we can have a conversation after that. Okay.
Caroline, I've had a staff member who's just tipped over the 4-week sickness absence, so I think I'll email you post this meeting just to get some help on that.
Yeah, exactly, and we can start that process rolling. Yeah.
Thank
you. Okay, good. Okay, well, that was a slightly longer conversation than usual. As soon as we hear anything more about the new job scheme, we'll pass that on to you. I'll give you access to all this information, and then anything else, as usual, we're here. We're not going anywhere ever again. It's awful. Yeah, we're here, and we can help you with anything that's happening. Okay.
Thanks, Caroline. That was really comprehensive. Thank you.
Lovely. All right. Thank you. I'll see you all next week. Bye.
Bye. Bye.